the two companies. Any questions out there? Feel free to type them in as well, or following the chat now.
Katrina, I actually had one question. So I saw that AgriDigital was started in Australia, but you're growing over here in North America now. I was curious if how different implementations of it compared against in Australia and the US, if it's pretty similar situation in terms of how farmers are keeping track of their inventory, or if it was, a vastly different, product direction that you tweak with, or what that looked like.
Yeah, so it's such a great question, Keaton. And I would say, on a base level, the similarities are so, farming is farming to a certain degree, but there are obviously geographic specificities. WayPath is actually a better fit for the US market than it is for the Australian, because we have so much more on-farm storage. And so our target customer is a farmer who has on-farm storage, and that is a much higher degree here and in Canada than it is in Australia. So that, I would say, is one really big benefit use case for the US. The flip side that I think is actually really interesting is there's really not a farming safety net in Australia. And so the Australian farmer has a lot more to risk in a bad season. They don't have access to insurance and other safety nets that we have. So what that means is I think Australian farmers feel a little bit more like they're really, like it could be a break season. If it's a bad season, you literally can go out of business. But what I've really observed is that, especially over the last year and a half, because the market has been so wild here, is that I've really seen a shift in how farmers here are thinking about how they manage, how they hold their grains, when do they market, all of the things that you're addressing, Keaton, through FarmStack, I think are really on the pretty broadly recognized. So those are, I'd say, probably the two biggest differences I've realized or noticed. And of course, there are specificities region by region and sort of different use cases. I mean, that's really a state by state basis. But as far as the platform works, it applies the same way. I think it's more the motivations behind why people think it's helpful.
Oh, interesting. I mean, that's awesome to hear the market's so potentially big over here for you guys.
Yeah, no, it's fun to be here.
So Katrina, if somebody wants to start using it or try it out, maybe I'll ask Abby's question to Keaton too. Do you have a trial period, or how might somebody get signed up to give it a shot, give it a try?
Yeah, so if you go to our website, agridigital.io, you can sign up, try for free. We have a 60-day free trial, so that really gives you a chance to get on there, to play around. You're also welcome to email me, and Carl, you can put our info on the Facebook page, but happy to help anyone and talk it through. So if you want to just go direct and sign up and get started, great. But if you want to talk to someone, I like talking.
Yeah, great. Yeah, we've been pushing it out through Facebook, and we'll definitely put it up. We'll put both of your email, or not emails necessarily if you don't want that, but the links to the recordings and so forth that we continue to push out there. Abby has another question. As Montana farmers begin to diversify even more, can this be used for specialty crops, or is it only for wheat?
Such a good question. It definitely is not only for wheat. So we work for all grains, oil seeds, pulses. So anything that falls in that larger grain oil seed family. And I will add, I'd say that I think WayPath becomes even more valuable the greater the mix of varieties or commodities that are planted, because it allows you to trace and segregate by each of those. So we certainly see that as the farmers managing more and more of that, that's where it becomes easier and easier to have that record keeping.
Any other questions there? So Katrina, I've got one. Sort of following on that point there, if you're growing multiple different crops, is there any other, I don't know, monitors, any other technology that needs to be deployed? How do you go about deploying it, and how soon do you start deploying it in your field or in your system?
Yeah. So the way it works is when you initially sign up for or sign onto your weight path, you would set up your farm. So where are your fields? And for each season, it's just a couple, it's just updating what variety you've planted on that specific field. And then when you get to harvest, it's actually a very simple process of clicking buttons on your app that we're harvesting from this field, and and so you just click, I'm in field A, and moving to X storage location. So then when you're in the program, you can see, okay, well, I know that field A was lentils, and so lentils went to this bin. And so it's actually it's really that simple. And so there doesn't need to be any additional technology that's a part of that. It's simply having input what was planted where, and then you're just tracking that as it goes along its journey from the field.
Great. And do you input that once it's loaded into the truck? Is that the point of?
Yeah, it's it's a little bit it's sort of farm specific. So we've got a lot of people who do it as they're loading into trucks. Some people do it when they're driving over their scales. Others, it's who's driving the combine, they see the truck coming. So it sort of depends on the complexity of the operation. You just have 2 guys going, or do you have 20 guys going? And so that's, I think, what makes it valuable, frankly, is that it's customizable to, it's a decision that you make. Okay, here's where we typically would track this, and now we're just going to track it digitally.
Great. Kelly, you hopped on with your camera. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to toss out a general question to both Katrina and to Keaton, and it's more personal in nature. I'd be super curious to hear from both of you. What excites you about the opportunity for tech in terms of the impact on ag? Why did the 2 of you land with these type of companies?
I can go first since I'm off mute. For me, I've been working in food and agriculture my whole career, and have always been focused on how do you help the producer be more competitive, to get the most for what they do. I'm actually not a farmer, and so value what farmers do. And so what are the ways that we can make that easier so that we have the food supply that we need? What's become really clear to me is that we have technology in so many aspects of our everyday lives that makes our lives easier for things that frankly aren't that crucial, although they're convenient, and seeing that simple tools can make a real difference in allowing the farmer to actually just focus on farming and not be dealing with all this administrative burden and logistics. And so to me, it's a very simple way that simple tech tools really can make it that much easier for a farmer to do what they want to do. And to me, that's there's so many complex solutions out there, and there's some really simple ones that can be implemented right now.
Thank you.
That's a great question, Kelly. I think for Carl and I, in the previous startup we were working on, is a very similar kind of problem. It was a legislative data startup, and all that data is available online, and anybody can go find it. But the problem is it's not condensed, and it's not. There's not much you can do with it if you're scouring through, bills and stuff online. And so when we were thinking about an idea in the ag space, we thought about kind of applying the same sort of framework. State Hill was the other company, and it was very successful, and that it added real value to people that had a hard time finding a way to use data to drive value in their day-to-day. And with FarmStack, all the data we use is publicly available. I mean, you can go look at prices, you can see analyses, but the difference is that we're condensing it, running some models on it, and trying to incorporate the same sort of State Hill-esque strategy of focusing on actionability of data instead of just quantity of it. And so I think I see this a lot with AgriDigital too. There's a focus on taking a step back from these sort of overpowered systems and focusing on simplicity, and how can a simple product be incorporated into a farmer's operation to just add value. So I think we're really excited about the potential impact that data and that technology in general can have on farming.
Oh, great, thank you both.
We've got a question again here in the chat from Abby to both of you, so you guys can decide who goes first. Any suggestions on ways to encourage those that might be reluctant to implement technology into, quote, the way we have always done it, unquote?
I guess I can start this one, Katrina. So This is definitely something we see all the time with FarmStack. I mean, there's, especially with things like marketing. I mean, it's a very, kind of, it's how your farm makes money. And so these strategies, a lot of times farmers are hesitant to change unless they see a really good reason to change. I mean, they might have a person who's been in the commodity world for the last 30 years who lives, a couple of houses down, and they just kind of base their strategy off what he or she says. And so it's really difficult to convince someone who's, been using and sticking with the same strategy unless you have a really good reason not to. And so that's been our late focus on quantifying the actual value add from FarmStack, of having, evidence and data to show that we do believe there's an actual net positive impact we can make. So I'd say, at least in our realm, the evidence and the data is kind of our best tool in trying to encourage people to explore other ways of grain marketing.
Yeah, to layer on that, and Abby, it's a great question. I would say I almost would put part of that back to you and say, from your experience, Abby, what do you think? How have you seen this work with your neighbors? But to answer from my perspective, what I would add on to what Keaton said, as well as evidence and data, is, one thing that we've really come to as a company is I don't want us to be in the business of convincing people to do something that they don't think they want to do. And there are a lot of farmers out there who are asking how they can gain efficiency, how they can be more competitive, more profitable. And that market sort of segment alone is really quite significant. And so the way I see it, if we can reach those people and show them, okay, this tool already exists for you, this is easy, it's what you're already doing, here's one step. It's building sort of traction and relationships amongst that part of the farming community. And we see this a lot where there's generational change on farms, and you've got the younger generation coming in, the older, and they're figuring out how to implement new things together. So we want to be there to help the people who are interested in change and feel like what they're already doing maybe isn't working quite as well as it ought to be, and helping them see that there are solutions. And I think there's a lot that follows from there as you see your neighbors or others that you trust. And we see this a lot online with people in different Facebook groups, et cetera. And so that's where I think it's really interesting, is helping the people who are already curious see that there's something easy that they can implement right now. And if there's value to that for them, then trusting that a larger sort of segment of the farming industry will follow. But Abby, if you have, here's the ticket, always interested to hear.
Well, Katrina, you and I have definitely talked a lot in the past, and you know that my family situation farming with my parents, my dad is very reluctant to try anything new. As far as having stuff on his phone, I have to probably promote it 10 or 12 times and download it on his phone for him. And then once he sees the benefit of it, then it becomes his idea, and then he's excited about it. So it's some reverse engineering, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and we do hear that. I had one customer I work with who's a larger farm, and they had a guy who was monitoring all their bins, and he was very not happy when they put in WayPath, and he had a whiteboard that he used, and he would sort of put lines, here's where we are in inventory. And they last fall, and I was catching up with them, they're like, well, we knew we'd made it work when we started to put, because for a while they'd been then, to make him happy, double entering on WayPath and the whiteboard. And one of them went up to the whiteboard and he's like, no, just put it on the WayPath. That's where we do it now. And they're like, okay, the 7-year-old guy is happy with the tech, but it's very much like there are always those parts of the operation. And I definitely take your point.
I appreciate that you say that you're not in the business of trying to convince someone to do something that they're not ready to do, because I think that is definitely swimming upstream. So I appreciate that comment.
I think Abby, that's a fundamental question about tech and ag, right? I mean, I think that's part of this conversation has been since we kind of started taking it up a few months ago. So yeah, maybe that's something we take up on this as a deeper conversation, is like, how do you make some decisions around adopting to this technology? Because it's not like downloading a new music app or something, because it makes my life convenient. Katrina, I think you said that, and but it's not terribly critical, right? But deciding, I think, as Jim was pointing out, actually making a decision to sell grain at a certain price for the year, you only get one shot at that every year, right? And if you get hailed out the following year, it could be a 2-year financial decision. So it's pretty significant. I'd call that critical kind of data. So you got to be pretty trustworthy of the system you're using to make those decisions under, both in like how much do you have, do you undersell, do you oversell, how much you have, and also the price you've got. So yeah, I can see how it could be something that's it's really important to somebody to pay attention to, and they're not willing to sort of jump in quickly without knowing all the information. Jim, I don't know. I mean, obviously you've got some personal connections to FarmStack, but how have you, in your experience, sort of look at adopting new technologies in your operation? If you're still there, I know, Jim, I don't know if you're muted.
Oh, looks like we may have lost him.
We may have, yeah, you may have. So he's still muted, you might have stepped away. But I think that's a good topic. Go ahead, Keaton.
One other comment I was going to add on top of what Katrina just said is something we've noticed that's been helpful in that whole technology broader implementation conversation. There's sort of this generational shift in farming. As farms get passed down generations, and old ways are kept and some new equipment's added or whatever it is. We've noticed that especially now with the most recent generations in farming, a lot of those people have grown up using technology, and so I think moving forward, the want to implement technology will probably only grow. I think it'll only be easier to implement some new system or some new technology into a farming operation if the person doing it has had exposure to those types of technologies and kind of understands the value add that those sorts of things can add. So I think the generational kind of shifting aspect and blending those two definitely is a key part of that.
That actually was oh, sorry, Katrina, I just say that was a topic that we took up last month when Aaron Nielsen was on and we talked about legal issues, was really this transition from generation to generation. And he's seeing that his clients that are making the transitions using technology more and more helps the transition from one generation to the other, because it helps that other generation who may have moved away, may have following another career outside of the state or away from the farm, start to pick up the operation from afar and then be better prepared to step into moving to the farm, back to the farm, bringing a family back to town, what have you. So he described that. And maybe this is a touchy issue as well, but he also said it increases the value of a farm, because if you're going to be purchased by a larger conglomerate and you're implementing some technology, they're also looking for companies like that they can purchase. So, and that's not one I necessarily support all the time, but that's how the technology can play in the transition. So I thought that's an interesting connection, Keaton. Katrina, sorry, I cut you off there. Katrina, were you gonna say something before that? No, okay. We are, so we typically go into breakout rooms, or we've done this only one other time. I said typically. So I'm not sure, we don't really have, we have a number of our team on here. So we have Abby and Jim and Kelly dropped off. So we really don't have that many folks to go into breakout rooms. I'm not sure if there's any more conversation. I don't know if Katrina, Keaton, if you want to follow up with each other offline.
Yeah, so I guess, because this is maybe a slightly different group or format than anticipated, I kind of value the broader group discussion, and certainly we can follow up offline. But one thing I would say to all of you is, Keaton, you were talking about the generational transition. That's something we're thinking a lot about. Or also, Abby, you raised the question about Montana farmers diversifying what they're doing. These are all things that we can really help facilitate. And so certainly I'd invite any of you who want to continue the conversation afterwards. I'm very interested to understand opportunities you're seeing to help that, because I think there's a lot of even more pressure on farmers than there ever has been, and especially as you see demand around carbon and non-GMO and et cetera, et cetera. And so I just think and then so many opportunities in Montana around our pulses and organic production. So I'm my call for sort of partners and collaborators was a really sincere one. And I will say, I feel very strongly that Montana is the state for us to focus on, and in which we can grow, because I think the farming community here is really very distinctive. And so welcome any further conversation around that.
Yeah, Abby, I think you and Jim are the sole farmers on the call so far, other than Carl. I don't know if Carl, you're doing any farming anymore, but.
I'm not sure I have much else to add. I look forward to continuing the conversation with Katrina and catching up with Keaton as well.
Hey, this is Jim. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear, Jim.
You guys asked a question a while ago, and I didn't know how to get back on. My son helped me, so if anybody wanted to repeat the question, I would respond.
Well, I think I was asking the question, have you, just sort of, we were talking about the transition, and I think Abby brought up the question of sort of how do you make decisions to use tech in your operation, sort of moving away from the quote unquote, business as usual, or how we've done things before. And obviously, you've got the personal connection with FarmStack, but do you use technology in other ways in your operation, and how have you gone about making that decision?
I think my kids pushed me into it a lot more than I probably would have. We're very repetitive on our farming. You do the same thing year in and year out. And you do, because I'm 66 now, I'm still very active farming. You've deleted in your process what doesn't work. Sometimes my kids have a hard time understanding why I might not do something a certain way. Well, a certain year it probably didn't work. That's why we don't do it that way. And that's what's always so sad when you lose somebody's farm for 50 years. He has so much institutional knowledge, whether it's in the mechanic area of farming or how you did things. But we have embraced a lot of technology. We use no-till farming. We don't ever plow our fields. We seed directly into the field. Yeah, we use chemicals. But we're trying to produce a very high-quality wheat product. We're not diversified. We raise wheat, and that is it. That's our focus. We try to raise the highest quality wheat possible, great milling wheat. And because we do that, we focus on that, we can get a high premium for our product. And I have neighbors that try lentils and peas and flax and barley, durum. But no, we're just focused on one thing and to do it really well. And what's neat about my kids, they're 31 and 26, they embrace the technology. Whether Carl has brought drones into our farm, and we do aerial shots of our fields like 10 days before harvest to decide what field is ready and what is not. You can see from the air what you can't see from our four-wheeler. And just how we number our fields and how we manage our data, we're getting a lot more into that because of the young people's input. And we used to just remember what we did. Now we have it on a spreadsheet or whatever. They really complement what I know. And it's really exciting to bring young people in and combine the two, combine the old and the new. And we produce a great product. And a lot of it is because of the young people and the technology, and also marketing ideas such as FarmStack, which is, it's made us a lot of money this year. So.
As the fourth generation farmer to the third generation farmer, thanks for that, Dad. But more importantly, I like to think that the things that my brother and I bring to the farm are definitely a compliment. And like, I would always say that, like, if I can convince my dad that it's a good idea, then it probably is. And like, I'm going to use that line that Katrina said, where I'm not in the business of convincing people to do things they don't want to do, because I'm just going to start doing them. Because like, I think that as much as I value the experience of the generation before, I also like to look into the future, and I like to be prepared for that future. And I remember, say, 10, 15 years ago, when just something as simple as driving your tractor straight was still a novel concept. And now that's like standard. That was something we integrated into the operation immediately. And like, they were super clunky things to drive straight with GPS. And now it's just how it is. And I think that a lot of this tooling we see nowadays is absolutely reflective of where the industry's heading. And tools like from AgriDigital or from whomever are supporting these efforts. And if we're not using them, then we're falling behind. And like the other side of that too is like technology doesn't have to be anything super fancy. And like, as my dad was saying, like, I think 10 years ago, 12 years ago now, like I just implemented a new system to name our fields because I was sick of referencing things by northwest, south of old house. That isn't a structured reference for me. And I wanted something better, something that we could just use as a canonical reference across all the farm. And we do that now. And we've done it for 10 years. And we have awesome data on each field structured as it should be. And like the next step of that for us on our own operation is definitely figuring out how to manage bin inventory. And like that's why I think the AgriDigital and Waypoint is super interesting. And as we're approaching harvest, I'm very interested in trialing this as well. But it's one of those things where it all comes together, and it's like not one thing, but it's the combination of them all. In the same way that waiting another day isn't a marketing strategy, waiting another day isn't a technology strategy either. And so it's like either you're doing it now or you probably never will. And like just simple things I've noticed, people that I've been around, seen lose farms. It comes down to, are you changing with the times or are you farming like granddad? And like, there's nothing wrong with either option. It's just a matter of choice. And I think for me personally, as a young person, the thing I love most is being able to combine what I love on the farm with what I know and I'm proficient at in technology. And like those two are a very powerful combination for young people, third generation, fourth generation, moving to fifth generation farmers. What can we add? And like, I'm not going to reinvent how to plant a piece of wheat. I'm going to follow what my dad does, but I can certainly add value in how we're tracking this, how we're working with the data sets, how we're extracting information from the metadata that we create. It's all very, very useful things for us. Long answer, sorry.
Oh, thanks, Carl. That's good insight. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Can I offer one more comment?
Please.
We have our little way of managing bushels and grain bins, but that is indeed it's a complicated process. We have to keep track of every bushel and where it comes off of what field and what bin does it go to and is it sold. That's a hard challenge for me because we have a lot of entities, a lot of different ownership of land, whether it's mine or my sons or families. And that's a real challenge for us. So bin and bushel management is a big deal. And whatever we can find to help make us manage it better is certainly an appreciated product, I will tell you.
Jim and Carl, I so appreciate hearing both your perspective. And Jim, you cut out a little bit for me, but I think I caught most of it. And one thing that certainly I'd love to talk with you and Carl about if we could be helpful. But what you point out is one of the things that we developed in Waypath is the ability to, when you're originally setting up, to set up different ownership. And so all of that managing your bushels and bins across owners is just built into your process so that you're not having to figure that out as you go through the season. You set that up once, and then as you harvest and manage, it's doing those calculations for you. So definitely let's connect after, and I'm be really interested to learn more about all that you're managing. But it's very cool to be in dialogue with both of you at the same time and hear your perspectives. And you obviously, well, at least what you're showing us now is you work very well as a family, which is really lovely to hear. There might be something else behind the scenes, but we'll take what we get on the scope of this call.
Well, we must get along because Carl gives up the month of August to fly halfway across the world to drive combines.
Very nice.
I am deeply appreciative of that. Because you cannot,
come up north. Come up north to Conrad, and we'll show you around. It'll be fun.
Watch out! You're going to see me sooner than you might want.
We're all invited.
Harvest starts soon.
Keaton, you're invited too. You can help shovel grain. Okay.
Great. Yeah, hopefully harvest is going to be a good one this year. It's not too dry for everyone. Any last thoughts, questions? I've enjoyed the conversation. I think it's been a good one. Maybe one last question, maybe to everybody here in the group, but particularly for Katrina and Keaton. Anything from us here at Amory and our team that we could do to help you all in some next steps, next months, year, or years? What do you need to sort of continue to grow and be successful?
I think, I mean, exactly what you're doing is, building a startup ecosystem, building a forum for people to talk about ideas and how to incorporate technology into agriculture. I think is, exactly the kind of dialogue that helps us. So, I mean, I'm sure we'll be paying attention to any in-person events or that we may hopefully find in the future, or jumping in on these calls, but just any sort of place to talk with other people about technology and agriculture.
Yeah, I echo Keaton, and I'll sort of reiterate again.